First of all, before I start the next part of the video, I'd like to apologize for this background noise. We have some extremely heavy rainfall here, and I guess that is going to come up in the recording as well, so I apologize for that. I think I must have already shown you a picture of all the parts as I've laid them in this partition box. This has a total of 6 partitions, and I've arranged them as I've removed them, so I can just assemble them in the reverse order. So I'll have to put them for cleaning now. This is a part that I made some major changes from my previous video. In the previous video I have actually cleaned all the parts in this solution called as mercury. I'm going to do the same thing now, but for rinsing I had probably used alcohol at that time, and I had not cleaned the balance, because you cannot just put the balance and the pallet lever inside any form of alcohol, and I had used isopropyl alcohol, which is quite bad for the shellac that is holding these jewels in place. So now I have white petrol, which is actually recommended by the manufacturer of the liquid that I'm using, and this white petrol, or aviation gasoline, evaporates quite quickly, and it rinses off this cleaning fluid. Also, if you just brush the fluid off, it's enough, but it's a good thing to just dip it once in petrol. Now they say that this fluid mercury, which is an ammonia based solution, is actually reusable, so I usually use it for a couple of washes, and after that I just put it into another bottle, and then I use it for clocks, because that can be done. That is also in the instruction. So it's a good thing to go through the instruction of the liquid whatever you are using. In India, this mercury, which is ammonia based, and another liquid called as Elma is quite popular. Mercury is more widely used as far as I know, so I'm using that. I have it in a glass bottle with a cap, so you can use a glass bottle or a china dish. I have some leftover fluid here from my previous repair, and I'm going to top it up with a bit more of fluid. So I'll start putting one part after the other into this bottle. Now here I usually wash the balance cock as well, but since the balance is attached to it, I have not had the best of luck washing the lever and the balance inside this liquid, so I'm just going to rinse them directly in petrol. Otherwise I'm going to wash the balance cock separately here without the balance set, and then I'm going to rinse all the parts. This is one change I'm going to do. It's not the best thing to do, but right now I don't have any other option. The larger parts. Now it's a good thing to use a different tweezer for the cleaning process, because it's going to get wet and it may turn a bit sticky. So I'm going to start with the biggest of the part, which is the main plate. I'm going to put that into this bottle as well, and next I'm going to put this particular bridge of the Killer's Works in there. It's a good thing to take a photograph, as I've done before putting them for rinse, so you know what part goes into which partition when you remove them. I'm going with the mainspring bridge, the barrel bridge, and the crown, the stem, as well as the hour. Next I'll put the SLS. I'm not rinsing any of the screws or the springs. This is the setting lever. This is the minute wheel. Not get them. Yeah, that is the minute wheel. What I have here is now the setting pinion. I have a bit of confusion with that name. Now this is the winding pinion and the sliding pinion, and this is the yoke. Now I'm going to put the cannon pinion, the spring that is supposed to hold the center second pinion in its place. This is I believe the third wheel. I don't know if this is the third wheel or this is the one. Okay, this is the third wheel. The other one, this is the center wheel, escape wheel, center second pinion, and the train bridge itself. Now if you do have confusion about the part names, or sometimes even where it goes, you may refer to the Esslinger blog. They have some PDFs of the manuals. You may I think you will get one for the B-91 as well. This is the my apologies, the camera fell off. This is the barrel bridge followed by the ratchet wheel. It could be a bit difficult to get the ratchet wheel out. Whenever you have any such difficulty, just use a piece of Rodico, and that should make the job a lot more easier. Thank you, that fell off. I'll just use a small piece of Rodico and then lift it out. That's it. And I'll just drop it into the cleaning fluid. After that, I'll go with the click. I'll go with the lever cock, and then anything else. I think we should have the air wheel. Yeah, the air wheel fell here. Our wheel, and the balance cock should be washed, but I'm not risking it with this fluid, so I think it's fine. Hairspring might have got a little damage in the camera fill. I'll just have to check that. And the lever also, I'm not washing it. Now the mainspring, I'm going to wash it separately, and I'll record it separately as well. Now these are the parts that I've put for cleaning. I'm not cleaning the rest of these parts, but for the balance assembly, the lever and the small springs, the dial washer and all, I'm just going to rinse it with white petrol. That I'm going to show again as well. So these are the parts I've put for cleaning. We'll just add a bit more of new fluid into this. Give it a bit of a shake. You just close the cap. Make sure you have a good lid on it. It should either be a glass bottle or a china dish, otherwise sometimes the chemical can just damage the container. You just give it a good shake, and then I'll let it sit there because it's quite late. I'm just going to leave it overnight, and then tomorrow I'm going to rinse it and do the rest of the work, including assembly. Now let us continue with the cleaning process of the B-91 movement. Now in the last part I had rinsed all the parts that I had removed from the watch in this glass bottle containing this ammonia based cleaning solution called as mercury. Now what I am going to do is I'm going to remove all the parts one by one from this liquid and see if there is any accumulation of dirt that the liquid has not removed. Now let us see one by one. And the first thing that I need to check for is the mainspring barrel, because that usually has remnants of old grease or oil that is used in it. And I need to clean that before I proceed any further. So I use a smaller piece of pegwood for the job. I just go to the interiors and I just clean it. Now you can do this with a toothpick as well, but pegwood is way better than that. What I do is I just rub the insides with the tip of the pegwood and I just rinse it again. Now you can see that I had actually placed the rest of the liquid in this cap of the container so that it is easier for me to remove all the parts from the bottle. Now the barrel bridge, I'm sorry, it's not the barrel bridge. This is the bridge of the keyless parts, and I'll see where there is any kind of an accumulation of any dirt or anything, and I'm just going to clean it up. Now if you leave the parts long enough in the liquid, most of these stuff get cleaned by itself, but it's just my habit to check it once. Now this is the train bridge. We'll just see if there is any kind of an accumulation. I don't see any. The next major part is the main plate. I just look for these kind of places where these kind of grooves and other places where there can be an accumulation. Now this movement was a bit dirty particularly, so I do expect some accumulation of dirt. Now this is the barrel bridge. Now this is the ratchet wheel. Now when you remove these kind of parts, make sure no other part is sticking to it. Now I don't think there's any kind of an accumulation on the ratchet wheel as such. Okay, there is some accumulation. Now the accumulation I'm talking about could be rust, it could be some kind of grime or dirt, or it could just be hardened up old oil, which I'm trying to remove here. Now, I'm not doing such kind of work on the gears because we're going to brush them later. The yoke. This is the crown. I usually look for any kind of dirt accumulation in this grooves of the crown. A few more parts. Be very delicate handling these parts. There's some dirt sticking out of it. Now you can see that most of the accumulation of whatever the grime that was there on these threads of the stem has almost disappeared by itself. I'm just going to try and clean it a bit more, but this much should be good enough. Now this is the winding pinion, and what else do we have here? We have a sliding pinion. Yeah, I think that's about it. There are a couple of more parts which don't need any major cleaning. So I'm just going to put everything back in the liquid again. I'll just let it sit for a moment or two, and then I'm just going to brush the parts and transfer it to white petrol for rinsing. The instructions on this particular cleaning fluid says that brushing is not necessary, but I feel it is, because there can be something accumulated which doesn't go just by rinsing it in the fluid, and that is the reason why I brush these parts. Make sure you have not left any parts out of this. I'll let it sit for a couple of minutes, or about 5-10 minutes, and then after that I'm just going to brush these parts. Now I got two brushes for the job. Now this one is way newer, and this I've used a lot on these kind of fluids, so I'm going to use this for the initial brushing, and after the rinse I'll use the more better brush for it, because this particular cleaning fluid usually discolors and makes the bristles go bad like this. So I'm just going to use this first, and then I'm going to clean it with the other brush. Just going to pour the liquid out, and I'm going to remove one part after the other and start brushing them. So I just keep it on my palm and a couple of strokes of the brush. That's it. And as soon as I'm done with it, I'll take another clean container, again of glass, and I'm going to put these parts in it. I'm just going to clean the container before that, and I'm going to place one part after the other inside this container. Now this is the container in which I'm going to put white petrol for the rinse. So I'm going to transfer one part after the other into that after I brush them. The ratchet wheel. Mainspring barrel. If there is some leftover cleaning fluid, that is okay, because our rinse is going to remove all that. It is possible to just clean it with this one fluid and then dry it after brushing it completely and use it in the watch, but rinse is something that I prefer. And again, there could be a lot more better cleaning fluids for both cleaning and rinsing. Another thing that I'd like to mention is that there are cleaners for watch parts, and there are also ultrasonic cleaners, mechanical cleaners, which can be used to save a lot of time and effort. But a couple of things, I'm not investing on one anytime now, and also I enjoy cleaning these parts by hand, and particularly these are not really costly watches or anything, so that is fine, I feel. I'm cleaning the main plate. I think this part of the service, which is basically cleaning of the watch, is something which is very subjective, and a lot of people have different opinions. There is some dirt here, just going to clean it off. A lot of people have different opinions on what is the correct method, and I think there's no one particular correct method to clean a watch. So you need to learn from experience, and you need to understand the different methods, and you should have your own which you prefer. But there are a few particular points that should be noted, whatever the methods that you use. And in no circumstance should you use alcohol for cleaning any of the watch parts. Something like isopropyl alcohol, which is good for electronic circuits but not for watches. The reason is because the pallet lever has two pallet stones, and the balance wheel has the roller table, which has a roller jewel, and these are made of synthetic materials and not metal, so it is stuck onto the metallic part using adhesive called as shellac, which is usually used in woodworks. But solid shellac is melted and added to these parts to attach them, and shellac is known to dissolve with alcohol. So if you rinse those two parts in alcohol, there's a good possibility that the shellac goes loose, and the watch may not run properly, or it may entirely stop. So it's not a good idea to rinse any of the watch parts in alcohol. The yoke. Be a little careful brushing the smaller parts with these kind of a brush. Once it's thoroughly cleaned, make sure you don't touch the parts as far as possible with your fingers, because you may induce dirt onto these parts. Since it's in the middle of cleaning, I think it's okay to touch them. Now the arbor fell off, so I just found it and I just gave it a one more rinse and brush, and I'm just putting it there. I got the stem. Having a good workbench where you can work with ease is another requisite, I feel. Now this is a very small part, so I'm not going to brush it. I'm just going to drop it directly in there for the rinse. Keep the gears separately, because I need to brush them separately. We have the wheel. What else do we have? The setting lever again. I don't think there's a lot I can brush here. I'm just going to put it for rinse. The minute wheel. Is the sliding pinion, again for rinse, and I have the cannon pinion. I'm just going to drain the excess fluid onto this tissue, and I'll put it into the other container. The setting wheel. And yeah, the click again directly for the rinse. And I have the escape wheel still in here. There it is. Drain the excess fluid and then brush it. I'm going to store the the remaining fluid. Now the other practice I have is to store this fluid until I'm done with assembling the watch, because sometimes what happens is by an oversight you may leave a small part or two inside this fluid, and if you pour it somewhere else, it could be a bit hard to find where that part went. So it's just my practice. It's good to have a lot of tissues handy. Now I'm just going to brush these gears and drop it for the rinse. You don't need a lot of brushing for these parts. Rinse is enough, because we're going to clean it anyway again with Rodico and the gate teeth and the pivots. Now for cleaning the gears, what I do is I hold it like this with the tweezer, and then I'm going to brush it on the tweezer itself, just like that. Be very careful and don't put a lot of pressure while holding or while brushing, because these parts are susceptible to jumping out of the tweezers. Center wheel should be easier to clean. Okay, that's how I can jump. Okay. Just make sure you're taking out all the fluid as much as you can. That's it. Now you should be able to see that I have got all the parts in here, all the parts that I had put for the cleaning. I'll see if I can get a better view. Those are all the parts that are now inside there, and that will be rinsed along with the other parts that we didn't put in this fluid for cleaning. For example, the balance assembly, I'm going to rinse that as well. Now before I'm going to do that, I'll just clean the mainspring. Now I have the mainspring in a Ziploc cover. That is how I prefer to store the mainsprings. Now, as I said before, someone has hand wound the mainspring, so it's deformed. It should be a good idea to change it, looking at how much deformed the mainspring is, but since I don't have one handy until I buy one, I'm just going to use the same mainspring. It should do the work. Now you should be able to see one more thing here. If you observe most of the other newer watches, you should see that the last part of the mainspring coils outwards in the opposite direction. If this is the tip, the the last coil is almost in the opposite direction. That is to provide extra torque once the watch is being unwound. When it's almost nearly completely unwound, there is a need of extra torque. So think of this, a wind-up toy, when it is almost running out of the winding you've given it, it will start being very slow, and that speed at which the toy operates reduces. Now we can't do that with a watch. We need the timekeeping to be absolutely correct. So the last round usually coils in the opposite direction, which provides some extra tension when the watch is almost completely unwound. But this is by design it doesn't have that extra coil, so we're just going to use it as it is anyway. You should be able to see a small fold at the end. This will indicate the end of the mainspring. This extra part here, this is what is going to get caught in the barrel, and if you don't have that, that means to say that the mainspring is probably broken. The other thing you should look for is a small hole which is almost near the inner part of the mainspring, right about there. That is where a small projection on the arbor is going. So the watch is wound through this part and it is unwound through this part, and you should take care of those things. Now to clean the mainspring, the process what I use is what I saw somewhere online. I don't know how correct it is, but I think it does a good job, at least to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a small piece of paper. It's good to have lint-free paper, but I just use some good quality printing paper for the job. You can see I have got two rectangular pieces of paper which are normal printing paper, but if it's lint-free paper, it's I think even more better. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to fold this paper in this fashion. I'm just going to make it into a very small this kind of a rectangle, and I'm just going to fold the tip over just like that. Okay, and I'm just going to dip this in the cleaning fluid. The reason why I have two pieces of paper is because I just I feel it's a good idea to apply the the fluid that I use for rinsing on it as well. The white petrol almost evaporates immediately, but it's a habit that I've developed. So now I've rinsed this in the fluid, and what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to fold this paper over the mainspring like that and start cleaning the mainspring from the outer coil to the innermost, just like that. I'm just going to pull the mainspring in, not too much of pressure, but just small amount of pressure. Now if you have a large enough container, you can rinse it directly. Now I don't have one. That is one of the reasons why I use this method. Now if it's an older mainspring, now this is an alloy mainspring, that is one more thing you should note here. If it's an older mainspring, it's also a good idea to lubricate the mainspring, and I use this same method with oil instead of the cleaning fluid to lubricate it. But here I'm just going to use the mainspring grease on the barrel. Now that is another change that I have from my previous videos. I used to use oil at that point of time, which is not the best thing. Now I have the mainspring grease, and I'm going to use that. Now you can see that I couldn't clean the innermost the circle right here, the innermost coil. So I'm just going to dip my pegwood, which I keep only for cleaning purposes, and clean it right there. That's it. Now the reason why we clean the mainspring is because the old grease can have some can get accumulated on the mainspring, and you can see that the amount of whatever the grime that was there on the mainspring, that is removed by the cleaning fluid. Now if you just run another strip of paper with the cleaning fluid again on the mainspring, you'll see that it's way cleaner. Now I'm just going to put this in the rinsing fluid as well. I think I can fit it in the container I use for rinsing, so that's what I think I'm going to do. Now I have filled a good amount of white petrol for rinsing, just so that all parts are immersed, and I'm just going to add the other parts that we had in our box for cleaning, for rinsing. I'm adding the couple of springs which we removed. These springs, you can clean it in the other fluid as well, but it is a bit hard to remove it. That is one of the reasons why I just rinsed them, and I think that should be enough. Now the balance itself, I'm going to place it in this orientation itself. Now be very careful when you remove the balance out of the white petrol, and I'm going to place the lever this way. That's it. And make sure it doesn't get tangled with any other parts, especially the hairspring and the lever. Okay, that's it. And I'm also going to put the dial washer in there. Optionally, you can also clean the screws, but I don't prefer doing that because they can easily get mixed up. And in this particular watch, the screws are actually quite clean, the outside itself, so I'm not going to clean that. If it's too dirty, mainly the crown wheel screw, which is already in there, and the ratchet wheel screw, which I've removed, you can clean those two parts. The rest of the screws, I think, can be left uncleaned. So I have all the parts in there except the mainspring. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wind it lightly like that, or coil it more precisely, and put it in there. It will open up a little bit, that's fine. Don't bend it too much. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to dip it in the white petrol. Since it's I cannot put it in there completely, I'm just going to dip it there, and I'm going to dry it off. Make the last parts get in there. Yeah. Now once I'm sure all the parts of the mainspring are dipped in the white petrol, I'm going to just hit some compressed air or use a blower like this and clean it off. This is just to make sure that all the fluid that we cleaned it with has got out, and there's no remnants of it. I'm going to clean the ziplock cover as well with some blast of air, and I'm going to place the mainspring in there and leave it till I wind it. Now if your fingers get a bit whitish like that, if you have whitish stains after you use white petrol or rather quick evaporating fluids like the lighter fluid, don't get alarmed, because that could just be that is just because these fluids are away from your skin and evaporates. Now it's not good to have it in large quantities, but a bit of that fluid falling on your skin doesn't do a lot of damage, so that should be fine, so don't get alarmed. And now I'm going to leave it there, let it rinse, let it sit for some time. Now it's very important to have a tight closing lid, and preferably airtight as well, because this fluid evaporates quite easily. It's if you just leave that without the cap, it will probably evaporate within probably half an hour. So it's better to have it in a container like that. Even in that, it evaporates quite quickly, so you should not leave it there. It's also okay to just rinse it and immediately remove it. I have a few other jobs, so I'm just going to leave it there, let it sit there, and after that I'm going to continue the cleaning and assembly of the watch. Now it's been already a long time since I rinsed all the parts inside white petrol after I cleaned it with mercury, and I'm going to take each of those parts and then drain the excess of white petrol onto a tissue paper, and after that I'm just going to brush it again, and if there is any remaining white petrol, I'm just going to use my blower to just to make sure that it evaporates completely. You can see that the fluid evaporates almost immediately once I remove it. I'm going to use the cleaner brush now, and just a bit of brushing around the parts. That's it, and just keep it like that and blow some air. Now after you do that, make sure you replace that into the same compartment of the box that you're keeping your parts in, that you removed it from before you put it for cleaning. And another issue you can have is that, as you can see here, another part came with the part that I took out, so be careful you don't lose any parts in this way. So this is quite small, so I'm just going to blow some air onto it, not brushing it, and I'll just replace it along with the other parts in the keyless works here. Next is the bridge for the keyless works. Yep, that's low, and I'm just going to brush it. And blow some air. That's it. Just reposition the camera. And I'm going to remove the balance now. The balance should be removed in the same orientation that I've shown before, just like that. I'm not brushing it, I'm just going to blow some air, but make sure you're holding the balance in its place while you blow the air. We don't want damaged hairspring at any cost. I'm thankful that the hairspring didn't get damaged when the camera fell on it earlier. It seems to be in quite a good shape now. That's it. Now I'll replace it in the parts box. I think I'll remove the pallet lever next. Yeah. I'm going to blow some air on it. I'm making sure that the jewels here are not loose. If it is loose, the watch won't run. So I'm just going to touch it onto something solid and make sure that they don't move from their place. But don't apply any kind of a pressure, because it will definitely get dislodged if you apply some pressure. So with minimal pressure, make sure that it's not loose. It's the yoke. Again, a bit of air. Now it's fine even if you don't brush it or blow any air onto white petrol, because it almost naturally evaporates almost instantly. But just to fasten that process and make that process a bit quicker, it's good to blow some air. Now while I was recording the previous part, my camera abruptly ran out of memory. It was just a 4 GB memory card, so I had to back it up onto the computer, and in the meantime I just cleaned the rest of the parts. I mean, removed the rest of the rinsed parts and brushed if needed and dried it. Since that was a thing that was not really necessary to show everything, I just took all the parts out, and I have it all ready for assembly. There was nothing else different that I could have told you at that part. So before we start the assembly of the watch, let's just assemble few of the other components that we took apart. That is basically the mainspring into the mainspring barrel, and the stem and the crown. If we assemble these two things and then check if the watch is in beat by checking the balance, we should be quite ready to continue with the rest of the assembly. And to assemble the stem, as I told earlier, you'll need the pin vise, and I'm also going to use some grease to lubricate the threads. Now if you observe the stem, the functional part is from here to here, which goes inside the watch, and the rest is just the threaded portion. Now the stem from the company is available quite long. This threaded portion is quite long, and you install it into the watch, and then you cut it to the desired length so that the crown just the crown sticks out and not the stem. So that is the whole idea here. And this threaded portion, I'm just going to lubricate it. Now I have attached it onto the pin vise, and this is some grease, watch grease. I'm just going to take a bit of grease at the tip. It's okay even if it's a little bit excess. And I'm just going to use the Rodico to clean the crown a little bit. Rodico, I can say, is one of the most versatile things in watch repair, so it's good to have some Rodico handy at all times. And I'm just going to thread the stem into the hole that is present in the crown, and tighten it completely. Now if you don't tighten it completely, you can end up with issues which look quite complicated, but at the end it's just that the crown is not tightened properly. So you just have to tighten the crown completely, and once you're sure that it's tight, just take the assembly out. Now it's my habit not to lubricate the stem at this point, even though it is desired to lubricate it, because you take out the stem again. So I lubricate it once I assemble it into the watch. So I'll store the assembled stem inside, and now I'm going to clean and assemble the barrel, the arbor, and the mainspring. Now here we don't have a lid to the barrel. Now the barrel lid is something which is quite common, but it is not present in the B-91 movement. So if there was a barrel lid, what I would do is I would assemble the arbor into the barrel, and then without putting the mainspring in, I would just close the lid and check for freeness. The arbor should rotate freely inside the barrel assembly. Now since I don't have a lid, I'm not going to do that. I'm directly going to assemble the mainspring. Before that, I'll just take a bit of Rodico and clean the insides of the barrel. Sorry. Just make sure that the inside is completely clean, the barrel walls as well. Now in the last video I had actually used oil for the barrel, but I realized it was not the best thing to do, because the grease gives better results. So I have mainspring grease now. This is a locally available mainspring grease. probably manufactured here in India itself, and I'm going to use that. And yes, even oil is okay to be used, but it is not the best thing. I'm just going to put a little bit of grease on the base, just a little, and spread it around. I'm using a flat screwdriver for the job. Make sure that the screwdriver is completely clean before you use it, and make sure you apply very little grease here. You don't need a lot, and a little bit on the walls as well. Now here I'm going to hand wind the mainspring because I don't have a mainspring winder, and hand winding should be good, but it's also frowned upon in horology. It's not considered to be the practice in winding the mainspring. There are mainspring winders available, but for a small time hobbyist like me, I don't think it's that necessary, because so far I've had good results hand winding the mainspring. So that's what I'm going to do now as well. Now once you're sure that the grease is evenly spread, I'm going to take out the mainspring from the car, and I shall start assembling it. Here's the mainspring. We'll start the assembly. Now before I took the mainspring out of the mainspring barrel, I had asked you to note the direction of the innermost coil, and I had mentioned that the innermost coil is in the clockwise direction in this particular moment. It is a habit of mine to take a photo of the mainspring assembly, the mainspring while it is still in the barrel, so I know which way to put the spring back in, because even if I flip this mainspring and if I assemble it, I can assemble it inside the barrel. I won't know the difference, but once I put it in the watch and try to wind it, it won't wind. So this direction is very important, and I know now that the innermost coil should be rotating in the clockwise direction. So I have placed the spring in the same direction, and I'm going to wind it in the same direction. So for winding it in, I'm just going to take the barrel with one hand, and this tip I'm going to place it against the wall of the barrel. It is okay wherever you place it, and I'm just going to push it in and try to roll it around the inside circumference of the barrel, just like that. You should be very careful while doing the first turn, because the spring can easily slip out here. Now here I'm going into the second turn right now. I'll see if I can get it close to the camera. I'm going into the second turn right now. The first turn is in. After that I can just speed it up. Now I mentioned earlier that many watches actually have the last turn rotated in the opposite direction, and if that is the case, you need to move against the turn when you're winding it in, and that would be a bit more difficult, but shouldn't be that difficult as well once you get the practice of it. But most of the older mainsprings are like this, that coils in the same direction, and that's easier to handle. And if you're dealing with an automatic watch, the end would be split so that the mainspring can slide around the wall, or technically it can slip. Now once you go close to the innermost coil, it will go a bit more difficult, and you should be a bit more careful. And once you're almost at the complete innermost coil, you can just push the mainspring in. I'm just going to push the last turn in, just like that. See that? So that's completely assembled. Make sure it's completely assembled, it's flat, and that's what we need. That's what we need. Now the mainspring is not in the best of the condition. We may not have the best performance from the watch, but as I said, I don't have a new mainspring right now, and that will do the job. Now I'm just going to clean the arbor in Rodico. Now it's a habit of mine and many watch repairers to clean every part in Rodico just before you assemble it. So any small dirt that may have escaped the cleaning fluids action can be removed here. I'm also going to roll it once in the Rodico. It's good if you can avoid touching it with your finger, and it's even better even if you can wear finger cords. No, I don't do that, but that's something which is way better. Now I have oil in this oil cup. Now if you don't have an oil cup, you can use any smooth and clean surface to put oil on. And there are also oil cups which have 3 to 4 such kind of dimples. where you can even place grease. Now the other thing I asked you to note before removing the arbor from the mainspring barrel is the direction in which it should go in. This threaded hole should be on the top like this, and this part will go to the bottom. So I'm going to lubricate this part first. I'm just going to place a couple of drops of oil here and here inside the barrel, inside the hole of the barrel actually, to the walls. Sorry. And just going to install it in there. You can add a drop of oil to the wall now, but again, I don't know what is the significance of adding a drop of oil on the wall right here, but that is practice that I've seen, so I'm going to do that anyway. And I'm just going to hold the barrel so that it doesn't move, and now I should push the arbor in such that it catches the innermost coil of the mainspring. Now I think earlier I mentioned there is a small hole in the innermost coil, and now there is a small projection in the arbor which should catch that hole. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm just going to rotate it slightly and push it in. Now that was easy. Okay, otherwise it wouldn't be this easy. It just went in almost immediately. Otherwise you'll just have to rotate it in the direction of the mainspring coil and then push it in simultaneously so that it locks in there like that. You should make sure that it's in and it's locked. It should be flush with the top of the mainspring right here. And now if you have a barrel lid, if your movement has a barrel lid, then you need to close, because a partially closed barrel lid can cause a lot of problems, including stopping the watch. So the barrel assembly is ready, and before I wind it up, I'll just put some more grease on top. Now this is important. Now there is no barrel lid here, but still it needs some grease if it touches the barrel bridge itself. Now I don't have a proper manual for the B-91 movement, so I'm just using the regular practices. Just spread the grease around. Don't put too much. Oil and grease too much is almost as bad as having too little. So make sure you just apply the right amount, which is just a thin layer on top, just like that. And if you have any excess, I usually keep some used Rodico. I mean, by used I mean I usually use it for a long time, and once it turns dark, I keep that Rodico in for jobs where there is this much of oil involved. I'll just use that to clean it. Now once that is done, I'm just going to keep that inside the box. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to take out the main plate and the balance assembly as well, but first let's start with the main plate. So I'll use Rodico to clean all these parts of the main plate. Now it should be clean already, but it's another habit that I've developed over the years. So any dirt that has accumulated there can be taken out using Rodico. Now at every point it should be good to use some magnification and see what is happening there up close, if there is any issue that you should solve. But since I cannot really wear my loupe and work, I'm keeping it aside. I'm just watching it from a further distance and working on it. Now once you're okay with it, the next thing that I'll be doing is to take the barrel, the balance assembly and its screw. So what I'm going to do now is to assemble just the balance onto the main plate and see how it would swing. Now I'm looking for freeness of the balance wheel as well as whether the balance wheel is in beat or not. So now it should be easy to notice where the balance wheel actually sits. Now here we have this small recess here for the escape wheel, the pallet lever, and this is for the balance. This is where the balance staff goes in. So that is where I'm going to place the balance, and the balance cock itself sits here. Now let us assemble the balance right here. I'll just let the balance staff, the pivot of the balance staff, into the hole right there and place the balance cock over it. Now one thing you need to know in watches is that if something is hard, don't use brute force. If something feels hard, just don't do it. So I'm not using brute force, I'm just trying to be as delicate as I can and let it settle into that place. You should let that settle instead of pushing it something into its place, because these parts are very delicate and a lot of things can be easily broken. Okay, I think that should be okay, and I'll just screw it in. At this point there are a few things that I need to check before I assemble anything else onto the watch. Now if I just shake it like that, you can see that the balance wheel is quite free to spring, free to swing, and I'll just use my fingers and make it swing like that, and you can see that it takes a long time to come to a halt, which is a good sign, and that is what we like to look for. The other thing that you need to notice is whether the hairspring is in one single plane, and a bit of magnification helps, and I'll see if I can get it on camera here. I think you should be able to see that the hairspring is running in one single plane, and that is what we'd like to see. If it is touching the bottom of the balance cock or the balance wheel itself, then this balance wheel will come to a halt very soon. It won't swing this freely. So then you have to correct the hairspring itself or replace it if it's badly damaged. Usually it should be correctable. So that's what I'm trying to look for here. That is one thing. The next thing I'm going to do is to lubricate these jewels here and here. Now in some cases there is a particular design which has the 3-point springs, which are usually present in Swiss movements, and I think it has a particular name, I'm not sure of that. That would be a bit difficult to remove and reinstall, because that needs a special tool which I don't have and which wasn't available anywhere here. So usually if I get that, I don't usually touch it. Now it's not necessary that you need to remove and clean it. You can just lubricate it from the from the top part as well, but it's my habit to remove them if it's possible to remove them. So I'm going to remove the jewels. So what I need to do is you should be able to see the spring here. The spring has a kind of a curved shape on left and right, and that is what I need to push inside one after the other. I'll push this in and let the spring out. I'll see if it's possible to show what I mean. I'll just push the spring in slightly and let it out. I'm using my tweezers. You can use a more pointed object, which will make the job easier. I think it's out. Just use a bit of Rodico to just lift it up. Okay, so that's separated, and that is not a good sign. I'll have to reinstall it. That is not something that would happen often, but it's not a good sign. I need to do some extra work to reinstall it now. Now I realized that actually the spring is designed in such a way that it comes out. Now this is something different from the others I've seen, and you should also note that even in the same movement you can have different designs of this particular Inca block assembly based on when it was manufactured. So what I'll do is I have a bit of white petrol in this the cap of this container right here. I'm just going to dip these stones inside this petrol and take it out immediately and let it dry on this piece of tissue paper I have. And it helps to have a sharp pair of tweezers. Now that is not something I prefer for the rest of the parts, so I keep one in reserve for jobs like this, and the parts are extremely small, and I think it will be very difficult to show it on the camera. So what I'm trying to do basically here is to just dip these couple of parts inside white petrol and just remove it from there and place it on a piece of tissue paper. That's all. And I also have that spring which I'm not cleaning. Now if this is your first time working on watch, and if you are not really thorough with the works, I'd advise you not to work with the jewels, because that can end up being very delicate. uh, Even with experience, it can be a delicate work. Now I have taken a little bit of white petrol in the tip of my tweezers, and I'll let it in here. I'll let the petrol spread in there, so I can just clean the insides of the balance cock, just like that. And I'll just blow it. That's it. Now I can assemble the rest of the parts of the interlock assembly. Now I'll first install this part, which is called as the hole jewel, which is the bigger of the two, and that will be quickly followed by the cap jewel, which is this. Now the cap jewel, you should note which side you're putting in. The hole jewel should be quite straightforward, but if you observe the cap jewel, you'll have a flat part and you'll have a domed part. So the flat part should go inwards and the domed part should face you. So before I place it in there, I need to lubricate it, which I forgot, and we'll just take it out again and lubricate it. Just the cap jewel. We'll just keep the cap jewel separately. Now there is a video on YouTube that I've seen before. I don't think I have the links for it, but it shows beautifully how the cap jewel should be lubricated. So I can advise you to watch that video, because I don't think it will end up being quite clear here. But the basic thing I'm trying to do here is to just hold the jewel with the tweezer in one hand, and I'll just take a bit of oil and place just one drop. Now it's important to hold it with the tweezers, because otherwise the oil will make the jewel stick onto the tweezers. Oil will make it stick onto the oil pin itself, which is not a good thing. Now I'll place the hole jewel in, and then the cap jewel in the orientation I said. Now with some magnification, I was able to reinstall all the components just in the way we took them out. It can be a lot difficult to work with it without magnification and with the camera in between you and the watch. So that was one issue I was facing, and I was not able to show the rest of it on camera. But the basic thing you're doing is you first install the hole jewel, followed by the cap jewel, which you have lubricated. I think I showed till there. And after that you need to reinstall the spring, and the spring should go in as you have taken it out. So you have to lock it in two places, just like how you removed it, just opposite of it. So if you are having difficulties like me working with this, what I'll do is I'll just for the bottom, there is a similar jewel on the bottom part as well. These are the Inca block shockproof jewel. They are present on either sides of the balance staff, there to make sure that the balance staff won't get damaged when there is a sudden shock, like when the watch falls off your hands. So I'm just going to remove the balance now and place it aside. And for the bottom jewels, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean it with a bit of Rodico and also a bit of white petrol. I'll just take it with the tweezers. I'll let some white petrol in there. Just like that, and I'll just clean it off with some Rodico. Now what you should do next is take some oil with your oiler or oil pen, like that. The tip of this is flat, so I'm just going to place a drop of oil there. It will usually stay on the surface, and I'll use something pointed like a pin, or in this case I have a broken oil pin that I use for this purpose. This kind of works, and I'll just push the oil so that it is driven into that hole right there. So I'll just push it in like that. That's it, and the oil should just settle there inside. I'll clean the excess off. That should do a good enough job as well. but if you can take out the jewels and clean it, for example if you're working with most of the Swiss watches and also Citizen or HMT, then it's quite easier in those. Now I'm just going to install the balance again. There's one more thing I like to check here. Sorry. I'm going to check if the watch is in beat or not. I'm going to thread it down. Now first make sure that the balance wheel is running in one plane and it's not shaking. There should be a very little shake if I try to move the balance wheel. Otherwise it would be the time to change the balance staff or the whole assembly itself, which is way easier. So that's what I'm looking for first. I'm looking whether the balance wheel runs in one single plane, and I think this one is good enough. It's level. There is a little bit of a shake, but I think I'll do with it. That should be fine. And the next thing, and the very important thing that I'm going to see is there is a particular jewel called as the roller jewel under the balance wheel. You should be able to notice that, and I'm going to look whether once the balance wheel stops, the roller jewel, is it going to align exactly with these two jewels right here. So if I look from here under magnification, and if I see in this straight line along these two jewels, the roller jewel should come to a halt in the same place along the same straight line inside there. So I should swing it and I should see if it halts there. I'll try to get it on camera. If it's not visible, I'll also post a photograph from a similar watch or a different moment where the roller jewel is properly visible. In most of the other watches there are two pins called as the banking pins, and we should look for the roller jewel stopping in between those two pins. Now the balance wheel has stopped, and if I observe it, if I just observe where the roller jewel is stopping, yes, it's perfectly aligning there, so there's no need to alter anything right here. If it's not aligning there, we should rotate the collet in the opposite direction, and there are some good amount of videos on YouTube, and even I would probably do a video quite soon on how to set the watch in beat, but this is the basic thing that we need to look for right here. And after that I will remove the balance assembly. I will take it, I will place it in the same box. Now before we proceed any further with the assembly of the watch, we should do something called as pegging. Now you can see that I have all the bridges, which is basically the main plate, the train bridge, as well as the lever cock out here, which are basically all the parts that has jewels in them. Now these synthetic sapphire or synthetic ruby parts right here are called as jewels, and we need to peg them. Now the cleaning fluid and the rinse should have removed almost all of the dirt, but in some cases there can be some dirt or some old oil accumulated in these jewels. So what we're going to do is we're going to take peg wood, which basically comes like a stick, and we need to sharpen one end, just like how you sharpen a pencil. So I use a pencil sharpener with a crank for this job. It can be done with a blade, but make sure you get it as pointy as possible, just like that. And it should be newly sharpened every time you use it on any particular moment. What you're going to do is you're going to hold it just like you're holding the screwdriver. You place it in the jewel hole like this, in the oil well basically, and then start rotating it. Just rotate it there, a couple of turns is enough, and after that I'll use a bit of Rodico to clean it. So to understand which way I'm going to put the pegwood in, I'll just show it under magnification. You should be able to see the oil wells there. Now that is the countersunk part right there. That is where the oil is placed, and that is the part I'm going to clean. So you should also observe how that part looks, so that once the watch is assembled, there is a hole in the middle of these jewels, and that is where the pivot sticks out. So you should look for that when you assemble the watch. Just clean all these jewels. Now this is the train bridge. I think the jewels should be better visible here, and I'll try and get a closer view. Now the other part are quite the other side is quite flat, but this is the side we're going to assemble it onto. We're going to clean. Just clean all those jewels. Don't apply too much of pressure while doing it, and make sure that it is supported, and you don't have a hole like this in the middle while you're cleaning it, because what happens is sometimes with age the jewels may wear out, and with some amount of pressure the jewel can fall off. That has happened to me in the past, and I learned it in the hard way, because it was a vintage West End, and the jewel fell off and I couldn't even find the jewel. So thankfully I ended up finding a different bridge which had the same jewel, and I was able to replace it. But it doesn't work that way all the time, so it's good to preserve what you have already. So that is pegging basically, and I'll just replace them in their respective places, so I can start the rest of the assembly.